Where does human morality, our morality, actually come from? Well, this is a favoured question of theists who feel that their morality lies rooted either in the existence of their God or in the existence of the texts of their belief structure. What I aim to do in this video is to provide a view, my personal view, on where all of our moralities come from, atheists and theists alike. In his book The Ancestor's Tale, Richard Dawkins warns us about what he calls the tyranny of the discontinuous mind. The human mind is very complex and human morality is very complex. A discontinuous mind only sees black and white. It only sees A or B. It doesn't see anything in between. But when we deal with complex things such as human morality, we have to accept that the actual answer may not be the simplest answer. We may not be able to just boil things down, distill things down to one factor. Let me present my case to you now. First, let's consider that which most directly links us to the rest of the animal kingdom. Although we may shy away from using the term morality when dealing with other species, what is clear is that the members of many other more cognitive species do not mindlessly go around raping and murdering their fellow kind. Instead, the opposite is true. Instead of murder, we see ordered relationships and hierarchies, with fatal conflicts avoided wherever possible. Instead of rape, we see elaborate courtship rituals run to well-defined, unspoken rules. We see devoted parents nurturing their offspring in ways most of us would deem as well worthy of praise. You see, there are evolutionarily selfish reasons not to rape and murder, which apply to us all as they apply to my domestic cat. The same goes for nurturing our children, aiding our relatives, and for forming bonds and friendships. In most cases we can make an evolutionary case for what my cat does, and the same case applies just as much to me. So I ask, is it not beyond absurd to assume that all mammals have these instincts and predispositions except one solitary species, Homo sapiens? Indeed, time and again experiments on humans, including some on monozygotic twins separated at birth, have shown strong correlations between our genetic endowment and resultant personality traits. At the most basic of levels, we are predisposed towards behaviours which aid our successful reproduction, and our successful reproduction is also the successful reproduction of those genes which guided the behaviour in the first place. In fact, it is difficult to imagine how any species could avoid having such innate predispositions, such as the situational advantage that it confers. This then provides the very deepest roots of our moral compass. It is our innate feelings and tendencies honed directly on the wheel of natural selection. It is at this point that my morality is charged by a factor that my cat seems not to possess, something that humankind takes to a level almost beyond the obsessive and compulsive. That something is called empathy, the ability to put oneself in another's shoes, and it is something we humans do far more than most of us realise. Whether we are shrinking at the vicariously felt pain of another, or feeling elated, moved or concerned at someone's story, our tendency to try and externalise from ourselves and view the world through the situation of another is overwhelming. Even as I compile this video, I am unavoidably and instinctively imagining how the content may impact on anyone who takes the time to watch it. Clips such as this one typically elicit a very predictable and instinctive response, especially in this case amongst other men who can associate with this poor chap more closely. Give it a few more seconds thought though, and many of us will also have considered how the opponent may have felt having delivered such a blow. This is something we do almost constantly throughout the day, appraising everything we do through the eyes of others and appraising the concerns of others as if they were our own. Clearly, for this to have become such a big part of our mental makeup and such a differentiator between how we work and how my cat works, something very significant must be going on. It is my view that this ability to empathise was and is crucial to the development and continued refinement of our morality. And this is where it really starts to get interesting. Empathy opens the door for sympathy, and with it the ethic of reciprocity. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. With empathy you can now fully appreciate the impact a potential act of aggression or sexual violence may have, or the benefits that may accrue from an act of benevolence to those close to you. Recall how earlier we discussed our innate responses and how, in other animals as ourselves, these led to just these kinds of solutions. Well, the beauty of this is that in the great majority of cases, the morally logical solution arrived at via evolutionary principles, whether that be self-interest or kin or reciprocal altruism, is exactly the same solution as that arrived at when one takes an empathetic stance. In my view, it is only because of this happy concordance that empathy had a chance to emerge. Had empathy led to solutions that ran counter to the innate behaviours that preceded it, behaviours that had obviously worked as the products of natural selection, it would have been snuffed out in an instant. Instead, empathy was a great success story, positively selected for and acting as a moral amplifier, boosting the gain on our innate traits, reinforcing both its own survival as a characteristic and locking the species further and further into an altruistic path. Furthermore, it is the ability to empathise that is actually being selected for here, and it is the moral outcomes that dictate which way the selection goes. Do we become more empathetic or less? But perhaps these outcomes have to be appraised by natural selection en bloc, as if part of a package of moral outcomes all resulting from this empathetic response. The upshot of this is that as long as the empathetic response is generally in line with the innate response, and it is generally driving solutions that are in the interest of the genes which cause it, then it could lead us to moral decisions which, on their own, are not in our selfish genetic interest, but are kind of bundled through with all the bigger evolutionary advantages that empathy confers. In this respect, it potentially makes mankind very special and very different from other animals in terms of behaviour and the potential for altruistic acts. Perhaps not special in the way theists assume, nothing has deviated from sound naturalistic processes, but special in terms of our capacity to go above and beyond that which is purely in our own interest or that of our genes. Whilst this pretty much covers the innate and intuitive aspects of our morality, there is much beyond this which is seemingly more arbitrary, morphing and shifting over time and around the globe. These are the cultural factors which form a defining veneer on all our moralities. We know from experience that clearly cultural factors can reinforce or counter the evolutionary factors and are driven by complex dynamic social pressures that lie far outside the realm of natural selection. The medium of cultural morality is ideas rather than genes, and it is in these learned behaviours and ideals that this component is passed on from one generation to the next. Religion itself is one of the primary vehicles by which the cultural component of a morality has been codified and passed from generation to generation, and demonstrates a vast breadth of notions on which it can touch upon. Look within the Abrahamic Ten Commandments and see the full breadth of morality, ranging from that which simply highlights the innate and empathetic, such as the instruction not to murder, through to the utterly arbitrary cultural instruction to keep the Sabbath free. An arbitrary rule for an arbitrarily assigned day in an arbitrarily 7-day series we term a week. So these three factors taken together then is the source of all our moralities, directly and indirectly, regardless of our beliefs. It is only with a rounded knowledge of the source and nature of this morality of ours that we can hope to avoid falling into various pitfalls, such as assuming that without the codification that murder is wrong, we would all be mindless killers with no way of intuitively assessing the act. Nor would we be able to distinguish between those morals which are arbitrary and culturally inspired and those morals which, whilst culturally promulgated and espoused, are rooted much more firmly in our makeup. So finally, a few words on the subject of objectivity. Theists often claim that only with a deity involved can morality claim some kind of objectivity, though it is not easy to see how a moral becomes any more objective just because a deity invokes it. Is it morally right in itself to dictate what is right and wrong in a world just because you created it? Ironically, the model I have given you contains a surer objectivity than any religious perspective ever could. Our very existence and purpose, ultimately, is as reproduction machines for our genes, an evolutionary fact that we really cannot get away from. With this in mind, we can be sure that, for our species and at this point in time, our innate morality is objective, as these are the predispositions that coldly best serve the interests and purposes of passing on the genes for which we are the vehicles. Some people may balk at this idea, but only if you hold the position that objective morality must automatically be superior to that which is subjective. The truth is we have choices to make, choices we are now enabled to make as members of a species so aware of its own circumstance. So how do we make the right choices? Well, perhaps by paying respect to those innate and intuitive traits that have served us so well for so long, but without being slaves to them, challenging them when they jar with our personal sensibilities. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope that by going through my own hypothesis of our moral origins, it helps you better define your own.